Rapid Transit, or as I prefer to call it, the Leipzig S-Bahn add-on, is the oldest German route in train sim world, launching nearly 6 years ago in December 2017. It is focused solely on commuter services on a linear route through the city of Leipzig, but it hasn't aged well at all. The section dovetail provided in this add-on is reasonably long. You get the 71 kilometers, or 44 miles of track from Markkleeberg-Gaschwitz up to Dessau Hauptbahnhof, going via the Leipzig City Tunnel in the process. Construction on the tunnel started in July 2003, taking 10 years and 5 months to complete, and this is easily the most unusual part of the route. The current S-Bahn Mitteldeutschland network is a combination of the formerly separate networks in Leipzig and Halle. The timetable has changed quite considerably over the years. More recently, though I can't remember exactly when, Dovetail updated the in-game timetable to match the 2021 schedule. Out of the 10 lines on the network, only 4 are represented in-game, namely S1, S2, S6 and S8. The S2 service is represented between Leipzig-Konnewitz and Dessau Hauptbahnhof, while S6 is represented between Leipzig-Messe and Markkleeberg-Gaschwitz, despite continuing further south to Geithain in real life. As for S1, you can only drive this service over the short section from Leipzig Hauptbahnhof to Leipzig MDR, when, in real life, it runs for a much longer distance from Leipzig Miltitzer Allee to Leipzig Stöteritz. The S8 line is kind of the odd one out, in the sense that it's the only one of the 4 featured services that doesn't go through the Leipzig City Tunnel. Instead, this line runs from Halle Hauptbahnhof to either Dessau Hauptbahnhof or Lutherstadt Wittenberg Hauptbahnhof. But in TSW, you can only drive the Bitterfeld to Dessau section, although I suppose it's better than nothing. Needless to say, I am quite disappointed in the lack of branch lines. The inclusion of only the S-Bahn services, and nothing on the regional, intercity or freight sides, means that there is no service variation on this route. On the motive power scene, this route is quite disappointing. In real life, the dominant motive power since 2013 has been 3 variants of the unique BR1442 Talent 2 electric multiple unit, painted in a distinctive silver, black and green livery instead of the usual Deutsche Bahn red. I don't know why that extra 1 is in the unit's designation. Normally it's just a BR442 instead of BR1442, or, in the case of the National Express variants, the BR9442. This add-on only includes the 3-car BR1442-1 variant of the Talent 2, of which the S-Bahn Mitteldeutschland has 36 examples. While that is the most common Talent 2 variant in Leipzig, the inclusion of only 1 variant in TSW is very annoying since, in real life, the network also has 15 examples of the 4-car BR1442-2 units, as well as 10 examples of the 5-car BR1442-3 variant. The 3 and 4-car units entered service in 2013, with the 5-car units not joining the flock until December 2015. This route in TSW is set in mid-2016, so from a historical accuracy standpoint, I don't see any reason why Dovetail should have only included 1 Talent 2 variant. This 3-car unit is a bit unusual, because the centre coach has 2 sets of doors on each side, while the driving coaches only have 1 set of doors on each side. For whatever reason, there's also a small first-class section at one end of the unit, and there's 1 bay of 4 seats, plus a table, decked out with kid-friendly artwork in the middle coach. You can also get a separately sold add-on that adds the Deutsche Bahn BR1442 to this route, and she comes with the same Doppelstockwagen coaches you get in the railscene Nord pack. This lot is used to represent how the Leipzig S-Bahn services looked before the Talent 2s arrived. And speaking of railscene, the BR143 locomotive also layers onto this route, but you can only drive her on the S8 service between Bitterfeld and Dessau Hauptbahnhof. The BR1442-1 unit is relatively easy to drive, with fast acceleration and braking, but you do need to time it right so that you don't overshoot the station. Presumably due to the model's age, I thought that she had very limited functionality, with the master key already being inserted. So all you need to do when setting up the train is put the reverser in forwards, make sure the parking brake is released, switch the interior and headlights on, then close the main circuit breaker and open the doors. I would go so far as to say that, especially in its default state before the big updates, the functionality of this unit was too simple. Following the somewhat major update, although I can't remember exactly when that was, the BR1442-1 finally has working destination displays, which can be changed via a screen on the driver's dashboard. Originally, the train and stations didn't have working destination screens, which simply didn't look right. Don't take my word for this, but apparently the motor sounds on this original Talent 2 variant were either synthesized instead of being recorded from the real thing, or just mixed really badly. I always thought there was something fishy about the way this unit sounds, especially when compared to the later Talent 2 variants from the Köln to Aachen and Riese to Dresden routes. This may sound very strange, but as basic as the scenery is, I've always kind of liked the aesthetic on this route. The stations are reasonably well modelled, especially on the underground section, with Leipzig Markt being my personal favourite station on the route. Comparing them to real footage, I'd say Dovetail's recreations of the 4 underground stations are spot on, but the rendition of the above-ground portion of Leipzig Hauptbahnhof is laughably bad. Lighting isn't too bad throughout the route, but for whatever reason, it just seems really off on the underground platforms at Leipzig Hauptbahnhof, with the trains looking painfully bright as a result. And as one should expect, especially from a route this old, the scenery hasn't aged well in many places, and it sure as hell isn't outstanding. For instance, there's patches of grass visible on the track at Leipzig MDR, and I also noticed this dodgy-looking terrain at the base of the flyover just north of Leipzig Messe. Hardly realistic if you ask me. The scenery is easily the weakest aspect of this route, and it's the most obvious sign that it has aged very badly. It only looks well detailed close to the track, and the distant scenery looks unrealistically basic by comparison. There are sound barriers on both sides of the line for almost the entire section from Leipzig-Konnewitz to Markkleeberg-Gaschwitz. When you're driving along, you don't see much of the scenery from the cab view, and the sound barriers conveniently hide the large number of copied and pasted building assets. These are clearly visible when you go to the external view while your train is stopped at Markkleeberg-Gaschwitz, and you can also see reused buildings on both sides of the track at Leipzig Nord. The scenery isn't too much better once you get up to the semi-rural area north of Leipzig Messe, but I do like the tree-lined section from Braunn to Dessau Süd. One example of very weak scenery is found in the streets right next to Chortau station, and surely I don't need to explain why this looks so bad. On the other side of the station, you can clearly see a strip of grass visible between the footpath and the street. Apart from the NPCs at the stations, and a scattering of unoccupied cars on some of the roads, this route feels very empty and lifeless. Personally, I think this route is neither good nor bad. While it's a decent length, and I do like driving high-density commuter services, it's disappointing that there are literally no other services available to drive on this route, although you do get brief cameos from the ICE 3M at Bitterfeld. Then there's the age of this DLC, and the annoying lack of those other two BR1442 variants, not to mention the existing variant and its severely underwhelming sounds. All this route needs now is an extension south to Gaitine, as well as improved sounds on the Talent 2 and addition of the 4 and 5 car units. If they can add the missing variants to that Leipzig to Dresden route in TS Classic, why the hell are they still not in TSW?